merely a dream. Action without vision just passes the time. Vision with action can change the world, said Joel A. Barker. Changing the world for the better has been the dream of the many greats who sweated and bled before us. Today, this cherished baton has been put in our hands. Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and fellow youth delegates. Recovering from a 30-year armed conflict, the youth of Sri Lanka today are faced with many challenges. Over the past few weeks, my colleague Senel and I traveled across the beautiful island of Sri Lanka and engaged in consultations with young people to capture their thoughts, needs, wants, aspiration, and vision. Sri Lanka provides state-funded free education to all its young from kindergarten to university. Consequently, our literacy rate is among the best in the developing world, 92.3% for boys and 90% for girls. Gender parity has been achieved in primary schools and gross enrollment is at 100%. The biggest challenge facing the Sri Lankan education system is the existing disparity in resource distribution and between urban and rural areas. There is a need for qualified teachers, infrastructure, and accessibility for young people living with disabilities. Unemployment and underemployment are not only the biggest challenges for youth in developing countries, but also for youth in the developed countries. In Sri Lanka, unemployment and underemployment are mainly due to lack of training opportunities and the absence of a smooth transition from school to work. In this aspect, skills development is a critical need of today. Sri Lanka has combined the ministerial portfolios of youth affairs and skills development. The ministry provides vocational training to approximately 25,000 young men and women every year through the island-wide network of vocational training centers. By establishing the University of Vocational Technology and by introducing a vocational training curriculum in high schools, our youth unemployment rate has been reduced from 21% to less than 18%. As the Finnish youth delegate earlier this morning referred to the Colombo Declaration of Youth, the outcome document, the World Conference on Youth, which many young people here were a part of, calls for a dedicated UN Day on youth skills development. We call on all governments, especially those that were represented at WCY 2014, to live up to their commitments and support this move. A UN Youth Skills Day would not be a mere celebration. It would create awareness among youth, decision makers, and other relevant stakeholders on the importance of skills, leading to a bigger discourse on providing better opportunities and aligning international cooperation with national needs. My earnest request is that we face our global challenges by connecting the experience and resources of our nations with the energy and ideals of youth. Let our global challenges not be a dream deferred due to lack of action. Let us prove Joel Barker right, taking action to transform our vision into reality and thereby change our world. Now, I would like to yield the floor to my fellow youth delegate, Senel.
Mr. Chair, 22 years ago, I was born to a Buddhist mother and a Christian father in a tiny island that was scarred by a bloody conflict for over 3 decades. My sister and I saw our father leave home to fight a battle of which we were too young to understand the cause or effect. Even though we never spoke about it, we lived with the fear that we too might lose our father. But the story I want to tell you, Mr. Chair, is not about my father. It's about my mother. In this palpably patriarchal world with unequal power relationships between men and women, my mother fought a lonely battle to raise my sister and I all by herself. She raised us to believe that there is nothing in this world that passion and hard work can't achieve. But women and girls around this world face many structural barriers that prevent them from achieving their full potential. This is why we think we need to rethink the way we look at structural dominance and power relationships in our societies. The youth of Sri Lanka expressed their solidarity with the He for She campaign that was recently launched by UN Women. As the Sri Lankan youth delegate to the United Nations, I commit to being a he for she, and together we will take this message to men and boys in cities and villages across our tiny island. While many countries in the region are focusing on the need to improve education access for girls, Sri Lanka is facing a reverse situation where girls are actually performing better than the boys. But while we celebrate these signposts of progress, there is still a long road ahead of us. As we remember with much pride that the world's first elected woman Prime Minister was a Sri Lankan, Mrs. Bandaranaike, there is much more that needs to be done to ensure that there are more young women represented in our parliament and other key decision-making bodies. Mr. Chair, in May this year, thousands of young people from around the world arrived in Colombo to attend the World Conference on Youth. Together, we discussed the role of youth in the post-2015 development agenda and adopted the Colombo Declaration on Youth. The Sri Lanka Youth Parliament is another unique example for mainstreaming youth participation in decision-making. Ms. Navi Pillai, the former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, who addressed the Youth Parliament earlier last year, called it, and I quote, an institution filled with bright, enthusiastic students from all across the country and dedicated to a tolerant and an all-inclusive approach, unquote. In the year 2000, when world leaders met at this very building to sign the Millennium Declaration, which gave birth to the Millennium Development Goals, I was only 8 years old. My generation grew up and came of age with the MDGs. Little did I know that the outcomes of this declaration, signed in a conference hall across the world, would shape my life in many ways in the years that followed. 15 years have come and gone. The young people of Sri Lanka are emerging from a conflict that was fought for far too long. We understand the power we have to change our lives and to change the world. We are a resilient people, and we are determined to take our energy, creativity, and ambitious idealism to strive to find solutions to our common problems. And together, we can make it happen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the delegation of Sri Lanka for its statement. And now I'll give the floor to the youth delegate of Turkey.
Delegate.